It was nearly midnight when the plane landed at Tokyo Airport. Among dozens of passengers, an elegantly dressed man stepped forward, carrying a small leather case, so calm that no one paid him much attention. He handed his passport to the immigration officer and waited for the usual stamp. But the officer suddenly stopped and read the same line several times. Place of birth, Taured. He looked up and asked the man about his country. The man answered confidently, as though the question itself was strange. Neither of them knew that this ordinary passport was about to open a mystery that would survive for decades. The officer slowly turned the passport's pages. It contained stamps from real countries, scattered travel dates, and everything looked disturbingly official. He asked where the journey had begun, and the man answered calmly before pointing to his country's name as though no explanation was necessary. The officer called his supervisor and whispers began behind the glass. Only then did the traveler's expression change. He did not seem afraid of being arrested, but of the possibility that Taured had disappeared. The immigration gate closed behind the man. Then he was asked to wait nearby. He sat calmly as his passport passed between officials. They searched their records for Taured, but found no country, no city, not even a similar name. One officer approached him and asked, "Where is your country located?" The man slowly raised his eyes and answered with confidence, "In Europe, of course." But the officer's expressions told him that the problem was no longer the passport. It was the entire world. A map of Europe was placed before him. He stared at it for several long seconds. Then he pointed to the region between France and Spain and said, "Here, this is Taured." But the name printed on the map was different. Andorra. The man leaned back in his chair, his eyes shifting between the map and the officers. Then he whispered, "This is impossible. My country has existed for centuries." At that moment, no one knew who was more confused: the man who had lost his homeland, or the officers beginning to question their own reality. The officer began repeating the questions. "Your name, your occupation? Why are you here?" The man answered without hesitation. He gave the hotel's name, the time of his meeting, and even the company expecting him in Tokyo. Every detail was precise. But one thing made no sense. No one knew him. The officer watched closely, searching for fear or confusion. Yet all he saw was a man beginning to doubt the world around him. Then the traveler said quietly, "Check again. I have visited Japan before." The officers called the hotel he had mentioned, and the clerk confirmed that the reservation truly existed. But when they contacted the company he claimed was expecting him, the answer was cold and clear: "We do not know this man." His documents, travel tickets, and several unfamiliar coins were placed before him. Everything looked carefully arranged, as though his entire life existed inside that small case. Yet every organization they contacted denied knowing him. For the first time his voice changed. He asked, "What year is this?" Silence filled the room. Then the officer gave him the date. The man slowly raised his head and stared at them as though he had heard a number that did not belong to his world. The experts began examining everything inside his case: the passport, business cards, travel tickets, and even the currency he carried. Some stamps belonged to real countries, while others bore names no one had ever heard before. The paper looked old enough to be authentic, and the stamps showed none of the usual signs of forgery. Every document said the man truly existed, yet the entire world said otherwise. One official stepped closer, placed the passport before him, and asked, "Who issued these documents?" The man answered without hesitation, "My government." The officials exchanged silent looks. The problem was not that the passport appeared fake. The problem was that it looked real, issued by a country that did not exist. The experts continued examining the stamps one by one. France, Spain, Japan. All of them were real countries, but some travel dates did not match the airport records. Strangest of all, one stamp carried the name of a familiar city, yet its official emblem was completely different. The officer asked the man to explain. He leaned toward the passport and studied the stamp for several seconds. Then he said, "That is the official emblem. It has always looked like this." The officials began to realize that he was not describing a completely unknown world, but one almost identical to their own, a world with the same countries and cities, where a few details had taken a different path. For the first time, the question changed. It was no longer where the man had come from, but which version of the world he belonged to. As dawn approached, the officials decided the man could not be allowed to leave the airport. They confiscated his passport and sealed his currency and documents inside a metal evidence box. Then they moved him to a nearby hotel, so the investigation could continue in the morning. The room was on a high floor, and its only door opened onto a corridor guarded by 2 officers throughout the night. There was no balcony, and the window opened only a few centimeters. The man entered silently, then stood by the glass, watching the lights of Tokyo, a city he claimed to have visited many times. Yet now it looked subtly different, as though small details had changed without anyone noticing. Before the door closed, he turned to the officer and said, "When you wake tomorrow, I may no longer be here." The officer assumed it was a threat to escape, but he did not realize the man was speaking about something else entirely. The hours passed slowly. Outside, the 2 guards remained at their posts. The door never opened, and no sound came from inside the room. At first light, one officer knocked. No answer. He knocked again, then used the spare key. The room was empty. The bed was untouched. The window was still nearly closed, and there was no sign of escape. They searched the bathroom, beneath the furniture, and throughout the hotel corridors. But the man had vanished. When the officers returned to the airport to examine his belongings, the metal evidence box was still sealed. Yet the passport, currency, and documents had disappeared from inside it as well. According to the legend, the man left nothing behind, except the name of a country that did not exist. The story of the man spread among the airport staff, but within days the details began to disappear. His name never appeared in the newspapers, and no official report was ever found explaining what had happened. Even the 2 guards who remained outside his room all night never spoke about the incident again. Some said the authorities closed the file. Others claimed the documents were moved to an unknown location, but no one could prove anything. The room remained, and its number still appeared in the hotel records. Yet the man was never seen in another country, airport, or official record after that night. It was as though the world had swallowed him, or returned him to wherever he had come from.